1 year later, Patrick Mahomes' record-breaking contract is still working wonders in the NFL. I'll tell you why that is. Financial people stick around. Plus, the war on cents. Stick around for that as well. In about 10-15 minutes, we'll get to that. Welcome to the gray area. Back in Stillwater, Oklahoma, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're finding this show or wherever you find your podcasts. Love this studio, and my name is Grayson Singleton. Welcome in. Let me start with this. The Patriots and the Cowboys. To me, there are two America's teams. Obviously, there's the America's team of my dad's generation. That is the Dallas Cowboys. My generation has not seen the Cowboys get to a conference championship. As a matter of fact, they have not been to a conference championship in 25 years and counting. Contrastingly, the Patriots have had two dynasties. They won 3 out of 5 in the early 2000s and won 3 out of 5 before Brady went to Tampa Bay. Aside from how they contrastingly represent the United States of America, the Patriots being the model of consistency with organizational structure and pristine communication, knowing when to change guard, versus the Cowboys, which is consistently mediocre, sometimes fantastic, sometimes awful, but most times 8-8. And America is supposed to stand for excellence and victory. That's why the Patriots, to me, are America's team, not the Dallas Cowboys. But aside from how they contrastingly represent America, their outlooks for the 2021 season cannot be any more conflicting. Let's start with the Patriots. The Patriots reloaded on offense. They drafted running back Ramondre Stevenson from Oklahoma. Sony Michel is fighting for his NFL life. The offensive line has been restructured, and the defense is a top 3 defense on paper heading into the season. Regardless of if Mac Jones or Cam Newton is under center week 1 or week 8, the New England Patriots could easily win 11 games, regardless of who the quarterback is, if it's the rookie or the 2015 NFL MVP. And it looks like it probably will be Cam Newton. But who's to say the Patriots can't win a Super Bowl? I know not a lot of people are thinking this, and I know a lot of people still think Buffalo is going to win the AFC East. But the Patriots are one of the 4 or 5 teams in the entire National Football League that could win a Super Bowl. Their defense is not going to give up points. They really never do in the Bill Belichick era. Only a handful of times, and really then we can call that a half handful, have they been a team that gives up points. Had they even been a bend or break defense, to be nice. But the defense won't give up points. They have 2 shutdown corners, which most teams don't have. And they have weapons on the offense. They have an unguardable tight end dynamic with the newly acquired Jonnu Smith from Tennessee and Hunter Henry from the Chargers. The Patriots' problem over the last couple of seasons has been that they haven't had guys that get open. Ladies and gentlemen, the Patriots are going to have guys that are open. That's their one weakness. And yes, we can say Cam Newton might have been a weakness last year. Well, Cam Newton was cut late by Carolina, late into the free agency period, signed late in the summer by New England, then had a truncated offseason because of COVID. Then he himself got COVID after starting the season 2-1 and playing one of the better games of his life against Seattle. Even still, the Patriots were not many plays away from being 9-7. So now you give Cam Newton a full offseason. He's been in the league, in the system for already a year. And he probably won't get COVID. I mean, he could, but the likelihood is pretty low. In Dallas, the Cowboys are more dependent on their quarterback. The Patriots are not. The Patriots are not quarterback dependent. And that's a great position to be in, particularly as you're transitioning through regimes. But with Dallas, the defense is young. The secondary is awful. The linebackers, we don't know what to expect from Jalen Smith. We don't know what to expect with the health of Leighton Vander Esch. And they don't have a pass rush. They have great skills position players. They have a potentially great running back. And they have an offensive line that could be great, but is also injury prone and old. Not to mention, Dak Prescott has not seen a football game, regular season, post, or preseason, since he snapped his ankle in Week 5 against the Giants. And with the latest shoulder setback, it looks like Dak Prescott won't even play in the preseason at all. So is my concern really with the Cowboys as much as it is Dak Prescott? Not really, because Dak Prescott, the first time he is going to get hit in a real game with men trying to pay bills, is going to be against the reigning defending Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And by the way, a pass rush that made Patrick Mahomes look like an over-glorified version of Joe Namath. So I have all the concern for Dallas. And yes, the Cowboys and the Patriots represent America in totally contrasting ways, but I think their NFL season is going to be just as drastically different. I think the Patriots can win a Super Bowl. I think Dallas at best is 8-9. Because you can't win that many games behind just the quarterback's arm, and now we've got questions about that. If the defense and Dan Quinn can get that defense up into shape and actually tackling and covering people, then you can maybe go 10-7. But that's the ceiling for Dallas. That would be the ceiling. I don't think they're better than Washington, and if you ask me today, on August 22nd, I don't think they're better than the Giants. So that's where we stand with America's two teams. The Patriots, the model of consistency, the model of excellence, pristine communication, and on the other hand, you have Dallas, the old America's team. Up and down, consistently mediocre, and with every question imaginable. All right, let's veer away from sports to something I've been wanting to talk about for about a week or so now. And I like to introduce new segments, so let's do that right now. This is our brand new segment, The War on Sense. Listening to the podcast and not watching on YouTube, you might think that Sense, S or C-E-N-T-S. I'm not talking about sense. We're not talking about the economy right now. Sense, S-E-N-S-E. The War on Sense. And recently, it doesn't make sense to remove most of American history from public schools. We get that. There's also not a lot of sense used when we're talking about how normal civilians have acted during the coronavirus pandemic. Let's transition away from that to now governing officials also not making any sense. And our topic today is mask mandate bans. So where are we right now? 10 states, Iowa, Florida, Montana, Arizona, North Dakota, Texas, Tennessee, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and soon to be Arizona have some sort of ban prohibiting county officials and city officials within their particular states to enforce any sort of mask mandate. Arkansas, however, was recently struck down by its Supreme Court, and Texas, my home state, has suspended the order from Governor Greg Abbott until further litigation. So why am I talking about this today? Well, number one, we're obviously in a state of close to emergency. I hope I'm not breaking any news there. Coronavirus cases are rising. The Delta variant is on the move. It seems scientific that masks might help stop some of this, not all of it, some of it, and mediate and negate the spread to some degree. But governing officials have said, we're not going to allow you to take that precaution. So here's some notes of this right here. Number one, they're obviously up across the country. Florida, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Arkansas are in the top 10 in the country of new cases per capita, which is going to be per 100,000 people, which I think is the best metric for measuring which states are handling the coronavirus most efficiently. Those states are in the top 10. By the way, Texas and Oklahoma narrowly missed the top 10. Florida, Texas, and Arkansas are in the top 10 of COVID hospitalizations per capita. Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Tennessee are 11, 12, and 13. And in Texas, this is becoming a real problem.
The Delta variant surging across the U.S. Overflow tents are being set up outside LBJ Hospital in Houston, Texas, as we speak. All of this happening as the northern part of the state is down to only 2 pediatric ICU beds. And after banning mask mandates across Texas, Governor Greg Abbott is now asking hospitals to stop non-emergency surgeries to make room for COVID patients.
It's disheartening. And I know some nurses have walked away from it, and some have just picked up and said, I can't do this no more. When you overrun us and you wear us down and we get to where we can't come to work anymore, there's not going to be anybody here to take care of it.
I'm an emergency medicine physician here in Texas. When I walk into the emergency department, it honestly feels as bad, if not worse, than it did a year ago here in Texas.
Worse off than last year? Last year was supposed to be the height of the pandemic, the spike of the pandemic, the plateau. And now we're back? And now governors are saying, oh, by the way, don't mandate masks? I'll get back to that in a second. Want to know another very interesting statistic? Of the states that have mask mandate bans, only Iowa and Florida have more than half their population vaccinated. Why? What is so hard about wearing a mask? Or why do governors feel like it's their duty to go above and beyond and say, hey, county officials, you can't do this? And let me be clear. I am no mask crusader. Would I much rather not wear a mask? Obviously, for one reason, it's harder to keep up with. It's an extra thing. I'm somebody who used to lose their wallet a lot. Case in point, me and most people in my generation have wallets on the back of our phones. But I want to ask people this question before I move on. Is this not the same or close to the same tyranny that people expected from the Biden presidency? Because I think that question is not being asked enough. Because, yes, I understand the use of the executive order. And technically, this is the constitutional use of the executive order. But if you take it from the top down and sort of condense it into each particular state, did we think there was going to be a federal mask mandate? I heard people decrying that that was very possible and that there would be a notice from the White House and an order from the White House, rather, that would overrule the states. Similarly, this is kind of happening. The states overruling cities and overruling counties, except they're overruling them to basically enforce something that makes no sense at all. And in Florida and in Texas, those states are seem like that makes no sense. Because in Florida, especially Alameda County as well as Miami-Dade County, those school districts are still requiring masks even in the face of Governor Ron DeSantis' ban. To the point where the governor is threatening to remove state funding from those schools. Now, thankfully, the president has come out and said that they will support these school districts that would get their funding removed. This is a tweet from the president saying, quote, "Let me be clear, we will do everything we can to support local school districts in safely reopening schools. American Rescue Plan funds can be used to backfill the salaries of the brave Florida school board members, superintendents, and other educators keeping our children safe." When asked about this whole thing directly at a press conference, the president said this.
And one of the things that I find a little disingenuous, when I suggest that people in zones where there is a high risk wear the mask like you all are doing, I'm told that government should get out of the way and not do that. They don't have authority to do that. And I find it interesting that some of the very people who are saying that, who hold government positions, are people who are threatening that if a principal says that everyone in my school should wear a mask or the school board votes for it, that governor will nullify that. That governor has the authority to say you can't do that. I find that totally counterintuitive and, quite frankly, disingenuous.
Biden would later say, quote, "As I've said before, if you aren't going to fight COVID-19, at least get out of the way of everyone else who is trying." So it seems like there's a mutiny within the particular state. This is happening in Texas. This is happening in Florida. This has happened in Arkansas, which the Supreme Court overruled the governor. So why? And the only reason I can come up with why there is a mask mandate ban, the key word here being ban, because if you don't want to institute a statewide mask mandate, that's fine. But you're going over the top to say the rest of you can't do it. The only reason, and this is particularly true, and I believe in Governor Greg Abbott's case, is that this is an emotional and politically partisan driven decision. Let me explain. In two of these states, Florida and Texas, both are becoming increasingly blue by the day. In the case of Greg Abbott is up for re-election in 2022. And he's also caused a firestorm with the way that he has tried to remove certain parts of American history from Texas, particularly removing Martin Luther King Jr. and Cesar Chavez from required curriculum. If you are alarmed, I am not being hyperbolic. That is a fact. Can it still be taught? Yes, obviously, but it's not required. By the way, Martin Luther King Jr. is unarguably a top 3 man in American history that you are not required to teach your kids about. How alarming is that? But the governor is up for re-election in 2022, and he took a swing earlier or late last year when he allowed the mask mandate to expire and said he would not renew it. That was a swing that didn't backfire because cases went down. This also happened the same with Governor DeSantis in Florida. Cases did not spike in Florida. Cases did not spike in Texas, but now they are. And what do you do now? You remember you saw that doctor in the video saying that the hospitalizations are through the roof. 98% of Texas ICU beds are now taken up by COVID. And my theory now is that we need to not just count deaths due to COVID, we need to count deaths due to people who couldn't get into hospitals because they were overrun by COVID as part of the COVID death toll. Because it's a residual effect that can be traced back rather easily if you're willing. So mask mandate bans. Look, if you don't want to institute it yourself, that's fine. But as the president said, get out of the way of people who are actually trying to take COVID a little bit more seriously than yourself. And whether you love or hate Joe Biden, whether you love or hate Donald Trump, or whether you're in the middle of either of them, we have to agree that might be the most logically coherent thing we have heard come out of the White House in quite some time. That's it. There's no tyranny involved in there either. And we can criticize Biden's response to Afghanistan, and rightfully so. I agree, it has been nothing short of horrendous. But we have to acknowledge that domestically, this might be the best thing we've heard from the president himself. Get out of the way of people who are trying. And I'm glad Texas has suspended the enforcement of Greg Abbott's decision. I'm glad that the president is going to now help people who are trying to not enforce this mandate ban in Florida. And I'm glad Arkansas's Supreme Court struck down the order to ban mask mandates. And that, my friends, is the war on sense. Let me finish up with this. Patrick Mahomes signed a $450 million contract prior to last season. And a year from now, it is still making waves. Now, obviously, it is not in the mainstream news because he signed it a year ago. But there is something good that Patrick Mahomes' contract did for the NFL. It put a price ceiling on the quarterback. Now, my mind does not work in economic terms very well, but I have friends whose do. And price ceilings are not something that economists like to hear because it is an artificial market influencer that normally doesn't do any good. Like a price floor, like a price ceiling. They might seem good, but they result in detrimental things to an economy. But in the case of the economy of the NFL, Patrick Mahomes' price ceiling will do wonders for teams. And let me explain why. Before Patrick Mahomes, what happened? The next quarterback who was extended just so they didn't hit free agency would be the highest paid quarterback in NFL history because the salary cap would go up. And before the coronavirus pandemic hit, which cost the NFL its revenue, which shortened the salary cap, this was a constant and consistent trend. Let me explain. Matthew Stafford, Russell Wilson, Carson Wentz, and Jared Goff have all spent time as the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. Jimmy Garoppolo as well. Let's go through those quarterbacks. Jimmy Garoppolo might be on his way out from San Francisco. Jared Goff was just shipped out by the Rams after a horrid Super Bowl performance a couple years ago. Carson Wentz, oops. And Russell Wilson has been a good quarterback, but has still not been able to get the Seahawks back to the Super Bowl since his second year. And Matthew Stafford has just been Matthew Stafford. Consistently very good, but surrounded with a horrid talent and an inept franchise, to say the least. All of those guys spent time as the highest paid quarterback. But since Patrick Mahomes signed the $450 blockbuster extension that keeps him tied to the Chiefs through 2029, two quarterbacks have gotten extensions. Their names are Dak Prescott and Josh Allen. Neither have come close to what Patrick Mahomes signed. Now, yes, the years are definitely a lot shorter, but even in terms of APY, average per year, Patrick Mahomes is at $45 million. Dak Prescott, neither Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, or Josh Allen, who recently was extended by Buffalo, have come past 43. Patrick Mahomes will also be the first quarterback in some time to make $60 million in one season. So why is this a price ceiling, number one? Because none of them are better than Patrick Mahomes. When the next quarterback, and it looks like it would probably be Baker Mayfield or Lamar Jackson, go for an extension, they cannot reasonably in their right mind say that the trend was that the next quarterback up is the highest paid. The Ravens and the Browns, respectively, are going to laugh at them and say, you ain't Patrick Mahomes. So that obviously saves them money. Number two, as we continue to recover from the COVID pandemic, what's going to happen with the NFL's revenue? The NFL's revenue will continue to go back up, which means, according to the collective bargaining agreement, so will the salary cap. So if Patrick Mahomes is a price ceiling, but the salary cap continues to go up, what does that mean? That means the Cleveland Browns, the Baltimore Ravens, and whoever is next to pay a team, probably the Giants with Daniel Jones, assuming they want to make him their franchise quarterback, will have more money to reallocate to other places, which means those teams might be able to sign more stars in free agency. Because it was always said that the quarterback takes up this percentage of the salary cap. Not anymore. The salary cap's going to continue to go up, and Patrick Mahomes' contract is still going to be here. And whether it's Baker Mayfield, whether it's Lamar Jackson, whether it's Daniel Jones, Justin Herbert, they're not getting more than Patrick Mahomes. which means in a rising cap, but with a price ceiling. Say the Giants want to go out and sign a big-time corner to go opposite of James Bradbury. They can do it. Say they have a hole in the offensive line that they need to replace. They can go get a guy like Jack Conklin or Taylor Lewan, a premier tackle. Say the Browns find out, hey, we need a big-time safety. Minkah Fitzpatrick, Derwin James, what if they don't resign with their respective teams? The possibilities are out there for every team to make their team better if they're not under the pressure to pay their quarterback money that would make them the highest paid player ever. Now, eventually, Patrick Mahomes' deal will get surpassed. It will, probably by 2026. But for the near future, the guys that are going to be up for extensions in 2022, in 2023, they're not touching Mahomes unless the salary cap balloons just so much. Then they reasonably will. But in terms of the near future, Patrick Mahomes is the price ceiling, and every other team that has a young quarterback should take advantage of it. All right, that'll do it for me on the gray area. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Great episode today. Glad to be back. My name is Grayson Singleton. God bless. Keep cool. And as always, keep looking for those gray areas. We'll see you next time.